Mm, mm. Okay. So our last topic is just to kind of provide what's called a general helping model. And this helping model can be utilized whether you're in the group setting, whether you're talking with some friends,
Okay.
or
So
oh, hold on just a second.
our last topic is just to kind of provide what's
That's
called a
strange.
general helping model. And this helping model can be utilized.
There's two of me. Okay, let's get back to this. All right, here we go. This general helping model can be used anywhere in your professional setting, group setting, or wherever it is, but it provides kind of a strategy to get to the problem, have that aha moment, and then have a discussion about what actions need to be taken. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, there's a reason this is in a Venn diagram instead of a step one, step two, step three, because they all do kind of overlap with each other. But let me take you through each of these as they're explained. The exploration phase, if we want to think about it in the formal kind of counseling area, the exploration phase is the assessment phase. It's when you're getting in social work terms, you're getting the psychosocial history. In counseling terms, you're doing the interviewing and the understanding where the client is coming from, what their story is. If you're a going into be a psychologist or psychiatrist, this is where you're administering some probably tests of some type. And hopefully you're doing all three. Okay. And this is where you're just trying to really understand uh, what the client is going through. Now, and this is the big but, is this isn't about and I'm just going to use this term, the counselor's journey. Okay. You use the exploration phase in order to encourage the client to talk and understand their problem. Okay. And so we're going to go through a couple skills on this tonight about how do we initiate this exploration phase, because what you hope is that before the client even asks you, so what do you think, they're already generating some insight. They're having that aha moment. And then where you come into play is helping them develop an action plan based on their aha moment. Okay. Now notice this general model is not putting you in the driver's seat. And throughout this course, we're going to talk about the notion of bias. Okay. Our experiences in life, our even down to religious beliefs, political beliefs, um, um, beliefs even about gender, can all, how do I put it, um, uh, damage the helping relationship. Okay, and this is important to think about. It's your job not to put your values onto a person or onto a client, but instead to know the client's values to get them to some insight perspective. Okay. And so so I'm going to go back to that center person kind of focus therapy, client-centered therapy that we were kind of talking about on Tuesday. Um, and this is again that relationship building part of the relationship between you and your client. Okay. And we got to remember when we're doing a client-centered focus, theory, we're not so worried about external facts, okay? What we're interested in are what is the client experiencing internally? Because in the exploration phase, we have to understand that external facts really don't matter because that's not your client's experience. All right. And it's important to kind of keep that in mind. And a lot of times you may feel like the client is being manipulative. You may feel like that they're just telling you lies. And I want you to realize that means you haven't done your job on building that relationship with the client. Or the client helper scenario isn't the one that that client best fits in. Okay. The idea behind centered focus theory is that we have an innate blueprint or set of potentialities that can be developed. And that we want to motivate our clients to become that self-actualized person. Okay. But the only way that can happen, as mentioned before, is bringing that real and imagined self more congruent with each other. Okay. And those are the things that we want to look at is, to recover from anything, addiction or everything. It's all about steps. If you think about, for example, the 12-step program, the AA program, everything happens in gradual steps. And that's how we get to success. And so how do we bring those things about wanting, for example, in some cases, the imagined self for someone might be, I want to live sober. I want to live without drugs and alcohol. But the real self at that moment may not be at that point that they can then be just that person they want to be. And it's important to kind of keep those things in mind. And so these are the things that, again, this is just an introductory part, but we'll build on these skills as we move along through the course. These are the things that we want to accomplish. And the first one is a client and helper must be in a psychological contract. And I'm going to include number 2 in it, is that the client must be in a state of congruency. I don't think that word in should be there. Okay. What this means is not only do you give them the informed consent, the paperwork and all that kind of stuff, but you two are in a state of congruency. And there's a term beyond the helping field that is something about having a state of flow. When you're in a state of flow, it's like the whole, except for that task you have in hand, everything around you, it's like it disappears. And you're just in an ultimate state of performance and ultimate state of engagement that that you're making things happen. Flow has been well studied in the field of athletics and those kinds of things about getting into that state of just being you're the player and you're the ball, and those are the only 2 things that matter. When we're talking about being in a psychological contract in a state of congruency, in the individual therapy setting, what it is like is it's almost like it's just you and your client. And you're both in such a state that there anything in the surroundings, any noises, the front office, phones ringing, all of those things kind of go away. And you're with that individual and you're in there with them, okay? The helper must be congruent, genuine, and integrated into the relationship. And I'm just gonna do a little bit of this is red, but we're going to talk a lot about being genuine, about being there for the person and not because, well, this is my job. I'm thinking of my next client. No, it's being there and remembering why you all are getting into this field into the first place, whether it's counseling, social work, addiction recovery, whatever it may be. And we talked about this on Tuesday, so I won't spend too much time on it, but providing unconditional positive regard. And I'm going to talk about when you enter the group room or your client room, the thing that I would encourage you to do is stop at your door and mentally or even physically. When I first started doing this, I did it physically. I physically took my biases. So I kind of pulled them out of my head and I set them outside the door. Okay. And then I walked in to remind myself that I'm about to enter a room where I'm going to have my biased views. I'm going to be biased because I'm human being. And I can't afford to hurt someone by putting my biases onto them. Probably an example that um, uh, I've experienced in the past is when I used to work with some, and I don't mean to make this an age thing, but it kind of is. Uh, older counselors who were paired with very young clients, especially in domestic violence and all those. And even if those older therapists have been through domestic violence, a few of them, not all of them, and please, I'm not spreading a wide thing. There were times where that older person would put bias on that younger person that they're young, naive, ignorant, um, uh, and all those kinds of things. And those are one of the things that that person needed to pull out of their head before they walked into that therapy room, because that's the only way you can provide this unconditional positive regard. You must have empathy for your client, not sympathy. Sympathy is that you feel sorry for your client. You're sorry that they're there in your office. You're sorry that, again, in the domestic violence field, that they were in a violent relationship. Empathy, on the other hand, is feeling how they understand and experience what they went through. Now, that doesn't mean you go get vicariously traumatized, okay? It's that you you don't apologize for what happened to them. You admit that they've gone through something that maybe you don't understand. Well, I'll tell you a story in a minute. You may not go through everything that your clients have gone through. And so it's okay to admit, I don't understand what you've gone through, but I can only imagine what that's like for you. Okay. That sounds very different than, I'm sorry that happened to you, or, oh my goodness, how awful. Okay. It's providing that level of, we may not have had the same experience, but I can feel or imagine how that must have made, that's how much it make you feel. Okay. The client must experience the helper's congruency. Okay. And this is the important part. You can give it, but if the client doesn't feel it, then it's not going to work. And this is where, in a lot of cases, especially when training new counselors in social work, I always told them to fake it till they make it. Because a lot of times it's not easy just to be in this state of congruency and empathy, especially as novice or new counselors and social workers. Okay. So what are some of the main skills when we're getting into the exploration phase? Um, One is attending, okay? And this is when you're orienting yourself physically towards your clients. You're attending is actually having a physical presence with your clients. So they're comfortable where they're at, but you are focused on them. Okay. You're not looking around, you're not fiddling with your pen, you're not looking at your notepad, your watch, or your phone, seeing if anyone's messaged you. No, you're physically present there. You are, in essence, and I know this sounds weird, you are that person's iPhone. Okay? Uh, um, and you're there for them and only them. Okay. And we'll talk more about these as we go. So these are some of the things to consider when looking at attending in a physical orientation. One is eye contact. Now, this is a cultural issue in that in some cultures, um, um, it's not appropriate to make certain levels of eye contact, but this is where you need to pay attention to your internal intuitions, because regardless of where your culture comes from, it's very easy to see when someone is uncomfortable maintaining eye contact. But the important part is that you at least maintain enough to know that you're paying attention to them. One of the mistakes one of my early trainees made is she was working with a Japanese client who came from Japan, where eye contact is not, especially a female to male, is not a very acceptable thing to do. And I remember this client, he was trying to do all the skills of eye contact, and the lady kept looking down, and he went and pushed up her chin and tried to make her do eye contact. And if you can imagine, that session ended very early, because after that the client closed up and wouldn't say a thing. So the point of eye contact is it is very important, very, very important. But you have to gauge the amount of eye contact that your client is comfortable for. And this gets into the mimicry, okay? The next one it encourages is nods, making sure that your non-verbal behaviors are coming through. So letting them know when they make a statement that you're listening. You don't always have to say, uh-huh, oh, okay, but letting them know that um, uh, that you're listening, basically. Okay. C is for cultural differences. If you're not aware of the way a person interacts with different cultures, look into it. Like the example I gave with religion on Tuesday. O means open stance, and this one is really difficult, especially when you're working with individuals that might be triggering to you. Having an open stance means that your arms aren't crossed, your legs aren't crossed unless it's appropriate, um, that you're not hunched over, that you don't have your elbows on your desk. Um, Open stance means that your arms are apart, your hands are apart, and that you look open to the client and you're not closing in on them, because when you fold your arms, that's a sign that you're uncomfortable. And so try to break those habits. I do know I this was one of my major issues is I used to fold my arms all the time because it was comfortable. It was just comfortable. It wasn't because I was, and so I had to learn, how to keep my arms from doing that. Okay. The second one is check for understanding, and I'm actually going to give you a task later on when we look into this skill a little bit more. But check for understanding is making sure you heard the client what the client said. So we'll get into this a little bit later. This is when the client tells you a story and you say, so what I heard you say, and I'm going to put this tagline on here. What I heard you say, and you have complete permission to correct me if I'm wrong, but blah, 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 blah. And then you wait and say, did I get that correct? Okay. Later in the semester, I'm going to have you do this with people you're comfortable with, because a lot of especially novice, they think, oh, they will catch on, that they'll think I'm just being a counselor, blah, blah, and it's not going to work. They're going to see the fakeness behind it. But the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. And eventually, no one picks up on, hey, you're just doing this counseling skill. It just becomes a normal part and a very fluid part of who you are. R is relax, don't look tense, don't tense up, and just kind of breathe, relax. Avoid distracting behaviors like clicking a pen on a desk, twisting a pen, your phone, all those kinds of things. And this is also, I'm going to put on here, well, no, I'll do that in a minute. Grammatical style. You want to match your client's grammatical style, okay? Meaning that you don't use any of the fancy counseling and social work terms. You don't use, the fancy, when you're talking about addiction and all, you don't use, well, it affects this neurotransmitter and this, with the gap between the cells out. No, you don't do that. Okay. And you use the terminology that the client is using. Okay. Um, I often say that when you get into the habit of using all the technical and academics terms, what you're really showing, you're kind of grandstanding from the client's perspective. You're kind of showing them, oh, look who I am. I can use all these fancy terms. And when we have interviewed people and said, hey, how did well, I felt like he was a little bit pompous, or he, was all, well, I'm this. And so be careful of using the terminologies that we do here in the academic setting, okay? Ears, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about listening, because even the best listener who I've had self-admitting people who say, I listen good, I listen to everything, and usually they actually are the worst listeners. They often get it more wrong than the people who admit, hey, I'm not good at this. I need to develop the skill. So this is something that indeed, when we look at research on 2 years of counseling, the 2-year master's degree in counseling, many of them actually drop out within the first year because they're not able to develop that listening skill. They're not able to pass the standards for that counseling program. And so this is something to keep in mind. This is one that you'll want to work on. And S is for space appropriately. The thing that I used to do when it was individual counseling, and then I'll get into group counseling, is I used to have my office set up to where the client could be sitting right next to me or directly with me in an open space, or they could sit at a more of a distance, or they can sit where there's a barrier between us, like a desk. Okay. And especially the first couple times I'm not the first one that enters my office. I invite them in, hold the door, and say, wherever you want to sit, please sit where you want to sit. And I would let them choose the space that they were comfortable with. Okay. Now, I will tell you one good sign in the individual level that you're doing a good job is they move from the boundary one to then the open distance one, and then to the close distance one. That's when you really kind of know you're doing a good job. In the group setting, it's good not to, for the first couple times, not to have the chairs set up or have the chairs kind of in a scattered place. And when the group members come in, say, okay, everyone, let's form a circle with our chairs, okay? And having them do that, because that's setting up their space. They may not have the option, in an individual counseling situation, but all of them work together and they're the ones that set up that space for the group setting, okay? So, and again, like I said, we'll get into these. This is just a kind of a preview of a lot of the things we'll be talking about. And I'm just going to elaborate on this situation. I think there's a Facebook meme that says, we don't listen to listen, we listen to respond. Okay. And we got to get out of that mindset. Because what we should be doing is usually when we're listening, while the person is talking, we're already generating a response. And where I want to get you all is that I want you to inhibit that impulse of generating a response while the client is talking. So I'm going back to that clarification thing that I mentioned earlier. Later in the course, I'm going to have you pick a safe person. And what I want you to practice is not developing a response, but understanding before you respond. So it should go something like this. Client says something, you check for understanding. This is what I heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. Blah, 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 blah. Is there anything I got wrong? The client says no, then you reflect on this and then say, okay, I think this is where we should head. Okay, that's where I want to get us. Okay. And again, the most difficult component of this, and we're going to explore our own biases, perceptions, and stereotypes in this class, because those also play a large role in the listening skill. Because a lot of times we may be working with someone that we may have a bias towards, a stereotype towards, and we're not listening to the individual, we're listening to that bias or stereotype we have of them. Okay, so we'll be practicing those as well. And again, this is just reflecting on what I just said, responding before knowing, effectively reflect on thoughts and emotions. Okay, so this is kind of making sure that you pay attention to the nonverbal and verbal aspects. And this is where when you do a reflection of what someone said, so you're giving what you heard, and at a certain point you stop and said, and I noticed when you said that, you kind of teared up. And I want to explore that more, but I want to check and see if you notice this. Or even sometimes I noticed that you kind of laughed and kind of enjoyed that moment you told me about. We'll explore that more here too, but let me finish what I heard from you. Okay. So and again, we'll practice some of these things. All right. Now, the thing that I do want to say, so we've been mainly talking about the individual level, but these skills do apply to the group in all their terms, okay? In that when you are the facilitator of a group, you are there to listen, reflect, and respond, okay? Because what you're trying to do is model this with all of your group members, because again, your group members are going to come in with their own bias, their own experience. And when someone is talking about something, you want your clients to listen and really experience what that person is experiencing without using their own biased perception or going, well, if, in one of the common ways where you know that you kind of need to work with your group is comments like, well, if I was in this situation, this is what I would have done. All right. That's kind of that statement right there is just stating what I heard from you is that you were wrong, you were bad, and if you just did it my way, you would be okay today. That's not where we want to head. Where we want to head is for everyone to brainstorm instead of using their experiences, not to tell their fellow group members that they did something wrong, but using the group process to bring up ideas of what the individual may or may be able to do next time to prevent that from happening. Okay. Okay. Wow, I did promise to keep this class short, didn't I? Okay. But basically, okay, we are done with the introduction, so this is okay to be this quick on this one.